We have on the show today a dynamic personality in Sandra, who after a difficult childhood blossomed to make a mark in society. Sandra is a book coach for women coaches, a healer, multiple times best-selling author, visionary, change maker, and founder of Awaken Inner Goddess. She's on a mission to help coaches, healers, and mentors get their first book out. She works with passionate women, out-of-the-box thinkers, visionaries, heart-centered coaches, mentors, and healers who want to expand their soul and bank accounts while making an impact. She had built 3 businesses by the age of 30 and wrote 4 best-selling books by the age of 34. She helps people dance to the beats of their own drum. Let's know more about her from the person herself. Welcome to the show, Sandra.
So I'm super excited to be here. Thanks so much, Premesh, for a wonderful introduction. I'm really excited to be here. So when I first, it's actually, I realized that on my anniversary, it's 7 o'clock, super early. I don't usually wake up this early, but I thought I couldn't pass up an opportunity such as this one. So I'm really excited to be here.
Thank you. Thank you for indulging us by waking up early. So let's start. You were born in Poland and had a difficult childhood with the breakup of the communist bloc. Please take us through your journey of the traumatic days in Poland to now where you're entrenched as a successful author and incubator of talent.
Yeah, thank you. So I'd say that part of my story is that I wasn't exactly born into riches. Let's just put it that way. Obviously, growing up in post-communist Poland, when the communist bloc in Poland collapsed, I was only a baby, 3 years old. So I don't really have much of a recollection of what happened then, but I know it from stories, obviously food stamps, really long queues. My parents really struggling because there's also a focus on the collective rather than the individual. And in terms of what the individual person could do, it was really frowned upon if you try to make a life for yourself, because there's so much focus on the collective, on the community, rather than the private property or enterprise. So this didn't necessarily foster the spirit of entrepreneurship, because the individual person wasn't really cherished in that sense. So there was really a spirit of jealousy, because it also meant that if other people, had more than you, then there were some animosities. And I really grew up in that, in the atmosphere of terror, if you will. One of the very first things that I remember growing up in the post-communist bloc, back then obviously we were still a part of the communist bloc, was the shooting that took place outside my grandparents' flat in Krakow, where I was born and raised for the first year of my life. And then obviously we moved, left that communist part of the city. And my father back then, he was, so he graduated, and he was a law graduate from one of the best and oldest universities in Poland, one of the second oldest founded in Europe. Still, because of the communist regime, he was forced to join the Communist Party, which my father refused. As a result, so he spent 9 years training as a lawyer, and he had to retrain as a roofer. So you don't study to become a lawyer in order to become a roofer. So for me, that was a symbol of dashed hopes and dreams. And I knew growing up in poverty as one of 5 daughters, I knew that my only ticket to freedom was education. So I was very studious, so I didn't, I found it easy to study. But then my father suddenly passed away, so he basically worked himself to death. When I was only 15, my baby sister was only 8 years old. And then my mother, who was a stay-at-home mom, and overnight she had to become the main breadwinner. She had no job, no experience, no education, and no cent to her name. And we struggled. So she struggled to put food on the table for many years after my dad passed away, because we weren't exactly rich, even when he was still around. So we went from living in poverty to being desolate. So that was a really difficult time in my life. And that's when I realized that I really needed to apply myself. Then I decided to apply to university after passing my high school exams. I didn't manage to secure a place at university. So all my hopes and dreams were dashed in an instant. And that's when I decided, because back then I worked as a nanny. And I worked as a nanny for the equivalent of roughly £1 or $1 an hour, which was still considered a good salary hourly rate back then. And I believe that at the age of 19, I started showing early signs of depression because my peers were really living the life of my dreams, and I felt like I was working as a really low job for a low pay. And that's when my best friend decided, oh, Sandra, why don't we move to Scotland? And so at the age of 19, we started putting plans in action. What ended up happening, so there were supposed to be quite a few of us moving to Scotland for a couple of months so we could save up for our studies or whatnot. But one by one, all my friends started dropping out. There were 15 of us out of 15 people. There's only me left. And I decided, I'm not, I went too far to back out now. My mom was terrified of, she was only 19, a girl moving across the pond to another country. But I just made up my mind that I was ready. So the whole family had to pitch in, all the aunties, my older sister, my mom, my best friend, and I still didn't have enough to live in Scotland for a month. But I just made up my mind, just book one-way ticket. And I actually struggled to find a job in Scotland for a month, and I hardly had enough to survive for a month. And on day 30, I found 2 jobs. So I was actually able to not only find a job for myself, but also for my older sister. So I moved her across. She joined me after a month. And yeah, so I had very humble beginnings. And I really credit my success to my family, because obviously they were there to support me. And then I decided, after living for years in Scotland, I decided, well, I could actually study. So I actually graduated from university in Scotland, in Edinburgh. And to cut a long story short, at the age of 20, I believe 26 or 28, I really toyed with the idea of starting a business. The way, so now this is, where the story of my life is. So that was a really tragic story, in the sense that at the time when I decided to start my first business, I was working in a minimum wage job, and I contracted a life-threatening illness. So nobody really knew what it was. There was really no name for it. There was no cure. It was highly contagious. And this is when the love of my life abandoned me on my deathbed. So he decided, he checked himself out of my life at the time when I felt I needed him the most. At the time, I shared my flat with my sister, but she was on holiday, so I was on quarantine. I was so poorly, I couldn't even walk. All my feet and hands were covered in really painful blisters. I couldn't stand on my feet, so I was crawling to the bathroom on my knees. And this was the moment when I gave God, or my higher self, my middle finger, because I just felt like I wasn't really ready to die. And I literally thought I was going to die, because nobody really knew what was wrong with me. And I felt like every single person in my life abandoned me. So my family, while supportive on the phone, they were not necessarily willing to come over because everyone feared of they would catch it. I was so desperate that I would reach out to my landlord. Oh, well, can you take me to hospital? He refused because he was afraid his wife would catch it. Then reach out to my best friend. I said she was busy. So like I felt like everywhere I turned, like there was really no hope. And I really had to find the strength within because I was under quarantine. I couldn't even leave my flat to get the groceries. And I had to resort to asking my clients to do the grocery shopping for me. So I believe that was one of the very lowest points in my life. But I also realized that I wasn't ready to die, and also made me realize that at the age of 26, that I haven't really truly lived. So this really motivated me enough to start my business.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing the difficult part of your life. We salute your courage for staring death in the face and coming unsaged.
Thank you.
And one thing that I noticed is that at a teenager, at the age of 19, you decided you wanted to move to Scotland and stuck to your guns, took your family along, and you realized education is a passport to freedom. Great learnings for us from your life. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
You call yourself an international best-selling author and a leading book strategist. While we can understand the international best-selling author, what does a leading book strategist really mean?
I love that question, and I knew somehow that question would one day come out. Like, why do I even dare to call myself a leading book strategist? So I believe that if you have any kind of business, I believe that we are all leaders, that we all lead. And I really see myself as a pioneer. So whereas if you consider yourself an expert, most experts, I would say they tend to work with people who are at least a few steps behind them. I see myself really as a pioneer. And as a pioneer, all this means is that I work with people who are ahead of me rather than behind me, which is why I call myself the leading book strategist. So the book strategist means is that I can really see how all the dots are meant to connect in terms of how your vision is meant to be unleashed out into the world. So I have 7 years of marketing experience, also business know-how and business acumen. And I'd say there are a lot of business coaches who have very little to no understanding of how the publishing industry actually works. And I've had we could say the privilege of working with well-meaning business coaches, and I love them to bits. But they were teaching things that they haven't achieved themselves, in the sense that they were business coaches. They had no book to their name, yet they were telling me how to write and publish a book. And that's like something's not right here. And I know this is what Bloom is all about bringing on experts who actually have not only the theoretical knowledge, but have actually achieved the things. They walk their talk. So that's why I really dare to call myself the leading book strategist, being a 5 times best-selling author. And we have walked hundreds of authors through the same process. So that's why I really believe that as pioneers, we lead, we innovate, which often means that the type of clients that me and my business partners work with are oftentimes a lot more successful than me. Something that I really love about the work I do.
That's nice. Great sharing. At what age did you realize you wanted to become an author or a writer?
I'd say I have, ever since I could read and write, I knew I always knew I wanted to become a writer. So at the time when my peers dreamed of becoming models, actresses, teachers, princesses, or whatnot. So I was only 9 years old at the time. And there was also a time in my life when my older sister was 4 years older than me. She really devoured books, and one of her favorite books was Anne of Green Gables that we tended to reenact. So we just did a role play, and we reenacted that book. And I knew that book like inside out. Was still it's still very much one of my favorite books. And I would always see. So when I picked up that book, I would always see on the cover, see the author's name, Lucy Montgomery. So she was the author of the Anne of Green Gables. And then when I opened the book, and I'd see, the second most important person in that book is a translator. And then I made this, well, I'm going to be like Lucy. I'm going to be a writer and a translator. And interesting enough, I have achieved both those things. And so it was really interesting that at the age of 9, I already knew that I wanted to become a writer and a translator. Obviously, as a 9-year-old, you don't really have the concept of who is really I didn't really have the concept, but I believe that on a soul level, I already knew that I would be writing books in a language that is not my mother tongue. But as a 9-year-old, you can't really, understand that concept of, you're either a writer or a translator. So yeah, I always knew that I wanted to become a writer ever since I could read and write. And interesting enough, for the first 3 years of my education, I hardly ever read any books, and I was one of those like lazy, talented students that still passed with flying colors.
So that clarity of thought at the age of 9 of wanting to become a writer, amazing. No wonder you are such a successful person.
Thank you. And I really credit being read as a child. So both my parents really read to me as a child, both mom and dad. And I believe that this really injected that passion for books and storytelling in the first place. So I'd say it's really important as a parent. I plan on having children. I'll definitely be reading books to my children, because I really believe that it helps spark creativity. Also, helps in terms of child development. So this is definitely worth emulating.
Good. Can you share an early experience where you realized language had power?
Yeah, so that's I really love that question, because it's such a deep dive question. So thanks so much for that question. So the very first experience when I really realized that words have power, I believe, is when I started working with my business coach. And I really see my business coach as someone who is really extremely authentic. When I first started working with her, so we started working on the business side of things, but interestingly enough, she also picked up on the fact. So she checked out one of my Facebook posts, and she said to me one day, "Sandra, like, your post, this is not you. This is not even your own voice." And I was a little taken aback. I was like, "What do you mean? I mean, this is my content. I mean, I wrote it." And she really made me realize that there's another level that I could actually go deeper, that I can become even more authentic. And she really challenged me. In the sense that she really made me see that there's more, that I could actually go deeper, that there's energy and power behind words. And so she really challenged me, and she encouraged me to put out a post. And in that post, I basically shared that for the first few years in my business, I actually reworded other people's content, and I mixed and matched. So it wasn't necessarily like the content I was putting out wasn't like 100% authentic. And I had to, so even admitting that openly, and obviously I feared that I would not be taken seriously. I was afraid I would be taken, people would think that was a fraud. So that like she really challenged me, she really pushed my buttons. And when I did that post, I really realized I received my post went viral. My post went viral on Facebook, and I received a lot of positive feedback. So that was for me was like a way to really open myself up to really receive more, because when we become more authentic, when we really make ourselves vulnerable, what actually happens is that we open also at the same time open ourselves up to receive even more love and validation and approval. So what I feared, so obviously I feared that people would see me as a fraud, because here I am admitting that for the first few years of my business, I wasn't actually putting authentic original content out there. It's just repurposing other people's content. And the opposite happened. Obviously, I have since stopped doing that. So yeah, I really, so that was really the moment where I realized that words really do have power, because ever since I really fully embodied my own authentic voice, that all my posts went viral, and that's how I was like received lots and lots of comments. So I'd say it's not necessarily about crafting beautiful sentence structures. It's not necessarily about the form or using the right words. It's more about being authentic, speaking our own unique voice. And this really made me realize that words really do have power. Words really do have power. So we don't necessarily have to have a PhD in literature to make an impact on the world, because all we really have to do is just be authentic and share our message in our own unique voice.
So displaying our authentic self is what is very, very important. Thank you for sharing that. Where do you get your ideas for your books? What kind of research do you do, and how long do you spend researching before you commence writing?
That's another great and a very, very interesting question. So how much time I really spend doing research for my books. And I would say that I'm going to say something that goes against the grain. So something that's probably not typical business advice. And I would say that if you have been in business for more than 2 minutes, if you are already an established entrepreneur, you do not, unless it's like academic writing, and I disclaimer, I don't specialize in academic books. You are your own research. So I don't do research for my own books, because I live and breathe what I preach. So I walk the talk, meaning I have been in business for long enough. And that's why I believe that as entrepreneurs, the last thing we want to do is do more research, because we already have that knowledge. Our books are about us. So I'm talking about business books. I'm not talking about academic books. So I hardly, if ever, spend any time researching my books. So the first book I wrote, Leap Afraid, was based on my own personal experience. It's not your typical self-help or how-to book. It's based on my life's journey, my life's path. And that's why I didn't really feel like it made any sense for me to research other people's books, because our book strategies often suggest, oh, you should read other books on a similar topic. And I really strongly believe that if you have a business, any type of business, if you have been in business for more than 2 minutes, then the last thing you want to do is research, because you are your own research. We all have a unique set of gifts, skills, and abilities that we want to put in the book. That's why for my own books, I admittedly don't do any research. All I can do at best is I could check out other books on Amazon and just read maybe I'll pull up some of the negative comments on Amazon, negative reviews of books on a similar topic, and I would just check, okay, what are they really saying? What are they really saying about this book? What do they dislike about this book? So that's the only type of research I do, that I also believe that I should not take more than 2 or 3 days. And I could read, so for example, if someone says, oh, this book didn't really cover the topic in depth, and here's what I'd like to see in a book of this type. So that's the only type of research I may do, but I really refrain from being influenced by other writers on a similar topic. But I feel that that's a really great advice for anyone considering writing a book. Just read the negative reviews on Amazon on books on a similar topic, because that will really give you a great idea. Okay, what else is missing? What do their readers really need? And obviously giving them what they really need, rather than, sometimes we think we know, but we don't really know what we don't know. So that's why I think that's a really great advice for anyone considering publishing a book on Amazon, to really read other people's negative reviews and write a book that really covers all those pain points.
Thank you for sharing that. Your authenticity is coming out when you talk about the research that you do or don't do while writing your books. You have read many books. Which is the first book that made you cry?
I'd say I'm a total softie. Lots of books make me cry. I'd say the very first book that I read as a child would be the book that was written by a children's book author. So she's a Polish children's book author. Her name is Maria Kownacka, and she wrote a book titled The Play-Doh Man. So when as a child we used to be given Play-Doh or plasticine to make some little toys, as well as like a rubber man. And she really often, the author in her books, oftentimes she talks about difficult subjects such as bullying or poverty. And the theme, the message of her books is usually that regardless of your background, where you come from, whether you're rich or poor, that we are, at the end of the day, we are all equal, that we all deserve a place in the world. And so the story of that plasticine man is, I believe that anything really that involves like any sense of injustice or any sense where there's some kind of abuse, especially that involves children in any shape or form, that is anything that could potentially make me cry. And when the plasticine man, obviously he's a toy at the end of the day, and he shares his little life adventures, trials and tribulations from the perspective of living in a pencil case. And he was created by a schoolgirl whose name is Tosia. And one day he gets kidnapped by the naughty schoolboy, and obviously he misses his family. And I believe that was really the moment where I was bawling my eyes out, because he really missed his family. And then he was put on the Christmas tree, and he couldn't get down the Christmas tree. Another book that really made me cry was The Girl with the Matches by Hans Christian Andersen. And I read it, interesting enough, I read it as an adult, and I just wouldn't stop wailing. So I was like bawling my eyes out. And I believe that the power of storytelling, whether that's in business books or any other type of books, is neurologically, we are really wired to respond to stories. So back in tribal times, you will be told stories by the fire, as part of the tribe. So it was part of the highlights of the ancient times. And neurologically, we are really wired to respond to stories. And this is how back in the days, the wisdom, the ancient wisdom was imparted onto future generations. And that's why I really strongly believe that whether it's children's books or business books, storytelling still has the same power. It still has the same healing and therapeutic impact on future generations. So I'd really say that storytelling really has the power to heal and transform the world, whether that's children's books or business books. It's still all the same, because all those stories can, in essence, make us cry.
If you had to do something different as a child or teenager to become a better writer as an adult, what would you have done?
That's another great question. So if I were to become a better writer, I'd definitely say I would not skip all those books that were prescribed back in primary school that I didn't even get to read. So definitely apply myself more. I would write a lot more. And I also believe that what really helped me is I used to keep a journal. So I used to keep a journal. So it's not very structured. Obviously, it was I kept it for my own purposes, for personal reasons, but I do believe that it really helped me become a better writer. As a teenager, I would also write a lot. So I'd write novels. I just make up stories and I would share. Even when I played with my family as a child, I would tell stories. So I would definitely read all the books prescribed in the curriculum, the school's curriculum. So really I believe that with anything of substance, like in order for us to become better at anything, whether it is that whether you want to become a better actor, you want to become a better singer or a better writer, at the end of the day, we cannot really become anything unless we do that thing daily and consistently. And I believe there's a lot of misconception in the publishing industry because somehow we expect, even if we do not currently consider ourselves as gifted writers, there are a lot of misconceptions because we expect almost overnight instant results. And I'd say, as with anything, you would, back as a child, obviously would not expect to just get on the bike at the age of 4 or 6 and just, ride in a straight line, because the chances are we fell off that bike more times than we didn't. That's like with driving a car. If you're trying to get your driving license, the chances are you're not going to, to drive that car in a straight line either. That it takes time, it takes consistency. That's why Sunday drivers, so all those drivers who only get in the car on a Sunday, they don't necessarily make for very confident drivers, partly because of, they don't do it consistently enough. So if you want to become a better writer, whether you're a child or a teenager or as an adult, I'd say consistency is the key. So I really say establish a daily writing ritual at the time when you're at your most creative. So really check when you are at your most creative, because we all have different propensities in terms of when we work at our best, when we perform the best, or at our most creative or productive. So for me personally, that's late in the morning. And so really develop some kind of routine to write daily and consistently. So that will be my advice as to how to become a better writer, whether you're a child or a teenager or adult.
Sensible advice. Thank you. Do you hide any secrets in your books that only a few people can find?
I'm so glad you asked that question. I knew that question will one day come up. So it says the short answer is yes. This is often known as the author's wink. So when someone gives you a wink. So I do have a couple of secret messages in the book intended for that one special person or a couple of those people. This is where the secret message within the book that only that one person can recognize themselves in the book. And I have used it quite a few times throughout the book, and mostly to get back out at people that really felt wronged me, because I knew that this was a safe space. It was very highly unlikely that they would ever pick up a copy of that book. But I'll basically call them out on all the lies they have been telling, our family for all those years. Yes, I definitely used that, and also used it in the dedication section in the book, because I dedicated my first solo book to my father who passed many years ago. And because my dad used to call us his little dragons. So I signed the book off, and I signed it off, your little dragon. And most people actually think when they pick up a copy of my book, they actually think that this is a quote, but this is actually me talking to my dad. So see, yes, that was the known as, this is known as the author's wing, the secret message for that one special person that only know they know what I'm talking about.
Interesting, very interesting. Do you read your book reviews, and how do you deal with bad or good ones?
Oh, that's another great question. Yeah,
Thank you.
I love your really deep dive, pointy questions. I do read book reviews. Obviously, I currently have 5 books on Amazon. So now I don't have as much time to take the time to review those. But I do read them, especially what I often like to do is like I start with the negative ones because depending how we frame it, if I see negative reviews as an opportunity to grow and expand, to become a better leader, to become a better writer, to become a better entrepreneur. So there's definitely a learning curve because our harshest critics shine the light on where our biggest growth is. So this is a really useful tool. I would say the first few negative reviews that you get hurt the most. And after that, we tend to develop thick skin. So I'd say when I first, I'm not sure what I call like a vulnerable experience. So when I first hit publish on my first solo book, actually interesting enough, the first 2 reviews were, I wouldn't necessarily call them negative reviews, but when you publish a book, so you pour all your heart and soul into the publishing process. And the first couple of reviews that I got were, the first one was a 3-star review and the second one was a 4-star review. And right in that moment, I just felt like, oh my God, like what have I done? I just put myself out there to be judged and criticized. Maybe I should just pull my book down. I just made one of the biggest mistakes in my life. Obviously I had lots of thoughts running through my head. I thought I'm a fraud. No one really likes my book. I was like, oh my God, like, this is the end of my life. And what actually ended up happening is everyone, and I believe that the universe really tested my resolve, tested really if I was really ready. And all the reviews, every one of the reviews after that was actually a 5-star review. So that was really interesting. And I'm really glad that it happened the way it did, because the first couple of reviews I got on my own book were, they weren't exactly, the readers weren't exactly head over heels with my book. But at the same time, there were not 1-star or 2-star reviews. So they were not exactly negative, if you will. But I definitely say the first couple of negative reviews you get will hurt the most. And after that, you just develop a thick skin. So the way to reframe it is just look at it as a learning curve. How can I get better? All those harsh critics, they're showing me where I can grow as a leader. And these days, I'm really grateful for all those negative reviews, and I hardly ever get any. But whenever it does happen, that always pull up the first negative reviews. I read the lowest rating. Okay, what do you have? Just show me where I can grow. And I occasionally also, if I know the person, I also occasionally reach out to them and ask them, how else can I improve my book? So there's really a great learning curve there. And I'd say what often happens that all those people who leave 1-star negative reviews, they hardly, if ever, put their name to it. So they hide. And another thing I'd say, they hardly ever leave a meaningful comment. So the much rather they left a 1-star review and told me, okay, Sandra, here's how you can improve your book. But they hardly ever do, mostly because they hide. They won't even put their name to it, so they don't put the money where their mouth is, if you will. So yeah, but that's a really great learning curve, a great tip there for all aspiring authors to really reach out to all those critics, all those the people, if you know them, if you know how to reach them, just reach out to them and ask them how else you can improve your book, because we don't learn from our biggest fans. We learn the most from our harshest critics.
Yeah, nice to learn that the negative feedback can be a learning curve. And it's rightly said, feedback is a breakfast of champions.
Oh, I like that.
You have been an established author. You have coached a lot of people. Do you believe in writer's block?
That's another really pointy question. I'm going to say something that goes against the grain, because I personally believe that writer's block is a human construct. It's not even real. So writer's block is a man-made concept that so oftentimes we like to tell ourselves, oh, I am creatively constipated. I don't feel like writing. But the question is, have you really established a daily writing routine? Do you really write daily and consistently to really find that flow? So as if you would, obviously we have been in lockdown for quite some time now. And if you haven't exercised for a while, the chances are that you're not going, if your goal is to lose weight or get back into shape, the chances are you would not expect overnight results. So if you have 20 pounds to lose, then the chances are that's not going to happen tomorrow. So the question is, we should really ask ourselves if we are really committed enough, if we show up to our daily writing routine daily, like consistently enough to really find that flow. Because I always say to whoever, to all the prospects or potential clients that approach me asking for advice on how to really overcome writer's block, and I say, I give them only one piece of advice: just write daily for the next 3 weeks. And if you still feel creatively constipated, then I experience writer's block, then get back to me and let me know. So far, nobody has. And the feedback I have received, that they all say one thing, like, wow, like I feel so creative and inspired. I just wake up in the middle of the night. I have my little notebook by my nightstand, and that's just right. So it's all about consistency, because just as we would not expect to lose weight overnight, the chances are if we haven't exercised in a while, then we will not feel like exercising, because contorting our body in downward yoga poses, it's not going to, we are not going to feel too excited about it. So that's really important to really build in some kind of consistency into our schedule, so we can really find that in the rhythm. And I'd say one thing that, obviously I'm human, and there are times in my life where I don't write as consistently as I would like. So at times when maybe there's Christmas or family over or holidays, and whenever I lose that flow, what I do is I go back to writing daily. And then we'll see, writer's block is a human construct, because when we think about the intuition and inspiration works for us 24/7, and just because we are not currently tuned in to that radio station doesn't mean that intuition or creativity stop broadcasting. So in order for us to really tune ourselves back to that radio station, all we really have to do is just do it consistently enough, and then we'll find that flow again.
Yes, so consistency is a key to beat writer's block.
Yeah, it definitely is.
My last question to you before I hand over to my co-host Deepak. Are there any unethical practices in the publishing industry? How does one stay clear of them?
Yeah, this is another deep dive question. I'm really glad that you asked, because I'd say there are a lot of crooks out there in the publishing industry, whether you decide to go down the traditional publishing route. So in essence, there are three main paths of getting published. So the best, I'll start with the one that's the most well-known. So the most typical route that authors usually take is they approach publishing houses, or they get a literary agent, and they publish their book that way. Then there's also hybrid publishing. So hybrid publishing is almost like the middle ground between traditional publishing and self-publishing. So hybrid publishers usually ask for you to pay them in order to get published. And the third publishing route is getting self-published. I'd say all three routes, there are certain things to really watch out for. I'll start with the traditional publishing route. So I'd say you really need to watch out for publishing contracts that do not really honor the amount of time and effort that you have spent on your book. So just because someone's offering you a publishing contract doesn't mean that you should take it. So just share one example. So there's a really well-known author. She's a British therapist. And when she first approached publishing houses, she was offered £2,000 for her book. And well, actually, the first original offer, I believe she was offered £10,000. And that publishing house actually forced her, we like your book, but you need to make a couple of changes. And she spent the next couple of months implementing all those changes. What actually ended up happening that they told her, oh, well, actually, we don't like it. So after all this time that she spent, making all those changes to her manuscript, she was told turned down. And then she decided to hire a literary agent to help her get a publishing deal. So then she received another offer. That offer was for £2,000. And back then, Marisa, obviously, she's a world-class therapist today, but back then she was just starting out. And she's like, I really need those £2,000. Like, I'm desperate. And she was really almost ready to agree to sign that deal. But her literary agent just said, like, Marisa, just hold off for now. I'll find you. I can promise you that I can find you a much better deal. And she eventually managed to secure, there was another publishing house that offered her, and just wait for it. So originally she was offered $10,000 from the other publishing house. Then she was offered £2,000 by another publishing house. And the final offer that she received for her book was £130,000. So this just shows that depending on where you go, sometimes persistence really pays off. And I'd say that obviously not everyone's at Marisa's level. She's like a world-class therapist. So typically, if you get traditionally published, you don't get advances of £130,000. Typically, you get around the £6,000, £10,000 or dollar mark. But one thing I'll definitely say about the tradition, what to watch out in terms of the traditional publishing deal, you want to retain as many creative rights as possible. I would also say that if you go down the traditional publishing route, you also want to bear in mind that if you have any type of online business, usually the path between the moment you reach out to secure a publishing deal to the moment that you get published, we are talking about anything between 2 to 4 years. So if you are in a fast, rapidly changing or growing industry, this is probably not the path you want to go down. Partly because by the time, if you think in terms of 4 years, I am not the same person I was 4 years ago. My business, I now have a completely different business than I did 4 years ago. So if you have any type of online business, or are in a fast changing, rapidly changing industry, by the time your book is published in 4 years' time, your book would have become obsolete, if not completely, then partially. So that's definitely a consideration. We also work with editors. The two editors that we happen to work with, they have been in the traditional publishing industry for 20, 25 years. They have left. The reason they left, because they all said one thing, that the book royalties that authors get, they also one thing that authors get ripped off by traditional publishing houses, that they don't get paid their book royalties. So whatever little book royalties they get, they still get, they don't get the amount that they're actually owed. And that's the reason they left there. Both work as freelancers, they work for themselves. Yeah, so I'd say that just because a publishing house is interested in you and wants to publish you doesn't mean that you should accept the very first offer you are offered. And it sometimes really pays to, ask around, don't get too attached just because the publishing house is interested in your manuscript. If you have faced a lot of rejection, we can be tempted to, oh, they're interested in me. I may not get a better deal. I just need to take it. And then you would end up like Marisa with an offer for £2,000 when you can negotiate and get a much better deal. So I'd always say, whoever comes to me, I always tell them, as an offer, you are the price, not the publishing house. So you really want to make whatever decisions you decide to make, you want to come from a place that's really empowered. You really want to see yourself as the price. Because the publishing house, even if you think in terms of how they run their business, publishing houses are not charities. They're not non-profit organizations. They're in the business of making money. And unless they think they can sell your book and market your book, then they would not be offering a publishing deal. So always negotiate, always see yourself, there's room for negotiations. So yeah, that's one thing I'll say about traditional publishing houses. And then I will discuss the hybrid publishing. So the hybrid publishing is, again, the middleman between getting traditionally published and becoming. So if you go down that route, I'd say there are very, very few people I would actually recommend going down the hybrid publishing route. I'd say hybrid publishing houses, so the way they work, they ask you upfront, so you have to pay them in order to get your book published. So the way it works is the hybrid publishing house gets their money upfront, meaning that obviously they receive the money before the book is published, and they will make a decent effort to market and promote your book. You'll get like a half decent or a decent book cover. But at the end of the day, you have to do the majority of the work. And one thing I will say is that just because a hybrid publishing house is associated with some big names in the industry, such as Hay House, and I'm not going to name that particular publishing house, but they're always check for reviews, because the type of clients that often come to us, they have been burned by the hybrid publisher. And that's the reason they come to us, because they're being asked, there's a lack of transparency. And there's also, if you go down that route, the chances are that you have to, market the book yourself. So it's not necessarily worth the investment. Let's just put it that way. You typically also get between 30 to 40% of book royalties. If you go down the traditional publishing route, you get typically around 10% of book royalties. So I'd say always check out the reviews. If the publishing house, a hybrid publishing house, is asking you for money upfront, always check reviews, read testimonials. If you can, try to reach out to their previous clients, their previous offers. Always educate yourself, because there are a lot of crooks out there. And I have personally helped quite a few people really renegotiate their publishing deal, or release themselves from that publishing deal, really coming from a place of empowerment. One other thing I'll say about the hybrid publishers is that you always, and this is also true for traditional publishers, you always want to retain as many creative rights as possible. Because what could also happen is, if you get published by a hybrid publisher or traditional publisher, one of the clauses in the contract often could mention that whatever products or services you offer within the book or on the back of the book, even if you are the one who created them, so the publishing house obviously didn't help you create them, you may have to pay them 30% of the profit of whatever you make on the back of the book, which in my personal opinion is a rip-off. So always watch out for those clauses. you want to retain as many creative rights as possible, to all the English world rights, to really make sure that you're making an empowering decision. There's only one person that actually recommended going down that route, who's a well-established thought leader, my next door neighbor, and he was perfectly okay to market the book himself because he has a marketing expertise. He failed to secure a traditional publishing deal, and he really wanted, he didn't necessarily want to self-publish his own book or learn how to publish his own book, and that was like the best path for him. But I'd say 9 times out of 10, I usually do not recommend that route unless you know exactly what you're doing. But we read through his contract, so we knew he was safe. Then the last, I'd say the self-publishing industry. Well, you could say, so what to watch out for. I'd say check out for reviews, read reviews, testimonials. You could even ask to reach out to the previous clients, ask for their experience, if they really felt the investment was worth it. So always, whatever path you decide to choose, always educate yourself, check reviews, ask for testimonials. You could ask to be put in touch with the previous clients, ask for a money back guarantee. Always read through the contracts so you know exactly what you're getting. I have read through quite a few traditional publishing, hybrid publishing contracts that when I read them, I didn't know exactly what the author was getting. So that's a really huge red flag for me. If the contract doesn't explicitly mention what you get for what you pay, and then what you could potentially have is authors, having to pay more and more. Oh, you still have to pay for editing. Oh, now you have to pay for formatting. Or now you have to pay for marketing. Or now you have to pay for publishing. So there's really a lack of transparency. So always read all the contracts carefully. Make sure you retain as many rights as possible, and always know that you can renegotiate. You don't have to accept the contract that you offered just because you could do with 2,000 or 10,000 pounds extra. So that's, I'd say, definitely always check out for testimonials and reviews to really make an informed, educated decision.
Thank you for sharing these tips. Very enlightening, very illuminative, and very illustrative. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much.
I request now Deepak to take it forward. My co-host Deepak will have some questions for you, and then we'll open up for the general public if they have any questions or read out from the chat. Deepak, all yours.
Thank you, Premraj. Hi, Sandra. Sorry, I had some work and I had to join in a little bit late. So I've been listening to your conversation with Premraj, and one or two things are something which came up into my mind. One, at what point does an author decide to become a ghostwriter?
Oh, that's a great question. So I feel that it evolved really naturally and organically for me, because I always felt that I have this gift that I could help writers like pull out their story in a really unique and authentic way. So this is really something I really see myself as a word alchemist. I really love playing with words, and it really comes naturally to me. And I really saw there is this other book coach that mentioned that she works as a ghostwriter. So I thought, this is interesting, and I love writing. I can really emulate other people's writing style, and this really felt like the next natural step for me to become a ghostwriter as well.
We also know a lot of these celebrity books are actually written by ghost authors. How does a ghostwriter, get into the skin of the person? How do they become him or her before they write the book so that it seems authentic?
Yes, I feel that it's really important to get to know them on a really deep level. So not just to know, read their posts or read some of the content that they have previously written, but also really know what makes them tick. And I really pride myself that I really get to know my clients really well, and I feel like I know them really intimately. I really know what their mission, what their vision is, what their businesses are, sometimes even what some of their blocks are. So I feel that part of the process is really getting to know them really deeply and intimately, not only in terms of their writing style, but also who they really are as a person. So when you ghostwrite a book for them, that it is really written in their own unique voice that really represents accurately and authentically represents their values and who they are as a person. So when someone picks up a copy of their book, then they can, they really get that person. They really get the sense of these are not your own, not your own words. So you don't. I'd say a badly written book would be where someone picks up a copy of the book and they can instantly say, "Oh, like no, you didn't write this." So that would be like a huge red flag for me. So yeah, I definitely say really getting to know the people you're writing for, really getting to know them, really knowing what really makes them tick, what makes their world go around.
So has it ever happened with you that you've ghostwritten a book for someone, okay, and not many people know about this, and somebody picks up that book and says, "This is Sandra. I know her. This is Sandra's writing. This is not that person who's claiming to be an author. I know this has been written by Sandra." Has that ever happened with you?
No, it hasn't happened, and I believe that it's also part of almost. It's almost like putting yourself in the shoes of that other person, really writing in their own unique voice. So it hasn't happened yet that someone like get back to me and just say, "Oh, I can see that this book was written by a ghostwriter." So in a sense, it's almost like acting. When you act, you are not yourself anymore. You just take on a different persona. So then it just it feels like that ever. So it doesn't feel there's no disconnect between who you are and who the other person is, because you just become that other person through writing.
Yeah. And has it ever happened with you that a book which you've ghostwritten has become far, far more famous than the book which you actually authored under your name? Has that ever happened?
Yeah, that's a great question. So my ghostwriting services, they're still fairly recent. So it hasn't happened yet, but I really love for that to happen. I'll be like absolutely delighted if that ever happened. And I love when my clients' results like exceed my own, when they do so much better than myself. So I'm always like excited whenever they do well with their books or their businesses.
Yeah, I want to take you back to that question which Premraj has asked you about, negative reviews upon what you've written. So now let's say there is someone who has written a negative review, and that this is clearly biased. They are doing it just so that they annoy you. It's not the right review. I mean, what do? You just take it, and then, or do you give it back? You reply back saying, "No, you haven't read my book. How dare you give me a negative review?" How do you get back to people like this?
I'd say because I was always tempted to get back out at all those people. You just left me a negative review. Like, who do you think you are? And then especially when you know that it's biased. So one thing that actually happened, that someone left me a 3-star review, and I believe that the reason they left me a 3-star review is simply because their religious beliefs don't align with mine. And so obviously there's really no room for negotiation here, but it's obviously it does happen, and whenever that happens, I was tempted to reply to get back out. Those people maybe try to understand their point of view, but now since I have let this go. The reason being is because whenever you reply to a negative review, I'd say sometimes it's actually easier to let them be. So let those reviews be. because whenever you reply to a negative review, you bump it up, and then it's more prominent, it's more visible, and then more people can comment or reply, and then so these days I may, if I know the person, because Amazon doesn't share personal details, whoever leaves a review, so you could go to, you could go look them up on Google. If you know who the person is, and I have personally done it in the past, so I'd reach out to them and just ask them, okay, how else can I improve my book? So not coming from a place, oh, I know you're biased because my spiritual beliefs don't sit well with yours, but just coming from a place of service. I want to grow. I want to become a better leader, a better person. How else? Thanks so much for leaving a review. I really appreciate that you left a review, and I can see that there are a few things that you feel I could improve on in my book. So how else can I improve my book? And I've received some feedback from that person. Some of it I agree with, most of it I didn't, but it's still obviously great feedback for me as a writer on how else I can improve as a writer.
Everybody who you see and meet on social media is a #1 bestseller author. Somebody's written 2 books, somebody's written 5 books. What do you attribute this to? I mean, is it because of self-publishing, which has made people write a book and author it and publish it easier, or people are now realizing the value of writing a book and getting their message across? What do you think is the reason?
I'd say both. So it's definitely become easier. It's definitely become easier to become a published best-selling author. And at the same time, people are also really recognizing the value of becoming a published author. Because especially if you have an online business, see the quick turnaround. So if you have a manuscript ready, then you could become a published best-selling author in as little as 4 hours if you hit publish on Amazon. So it no longer takes years. If you go down the traditional publishing route, it could take you between 2 to 4 years to get your book published. By the time, obviously, that book could possibly become obsolete. So yes. I really believe that people are really starting to recognize the value of becoming a published author. They really see the value in terms of what it can do to their business, how fast they can really scale and grow. It's also the ease of it, because once you learn how to write and publish a book, it's a learned, repeatable skill. It's something you can learn it once, and then you can publish many more books. And that's one thing about writing, I'd say, is that it's highly addictive. Once you get the first book out, then the chances are that you write many more. So it can really be highly addictive.
Also, I don't know whether Premraj has asked this question, but let's say somebody is now listening to you and is really inspired now to become an author. What is those 1, 2, maybe even those 3 things you would tell him or her? Start doing this, do this, and then give yourself time, 3 months, 6 months, and you will be ready. What are those 2 or 3 things which you can tell them?
Yes, I'll definitely say to write daily and consistently. So typically, if you are writing a how-to, self-help, transformational, or business books, typically such a book has around 40,000 to 50,000 words. So say divide that number, 40,000 or 50,000, by the number of days, obviously, by when you want to get that book published. So if your desire is to get your book published within the next, or have your book written, at the very least, the rough draft, within the next 30 days, and divide 40,000 words by 30 days, and that will give you a daily word count to really strive for. So let's say even if you miss a couple of days, maybe you have your auntie coming over, family visit, and then you skip a day or 2, then what you could do is, as long as you stick to your weekly word count, then you're still on track. So you're still going to get that book written in the period of 30 days. So that's the very first advice I'd say. And yes. Another piece of advice I would give any aspiring or emerging author is to really write their book coming from a place of where they want to be rather than where they currently are. So what this means is, when I wrote my first book, I was working 2 full-time jobs. I was at the same time running two businesses and I had very little time. So, and that can become a blessing. So always write a book coming from a place of where you want to be. So obviously I didn't want to continue working two full-time jobs. And I wrote my book coming from a place as if I already had a thriving coaching business. And I really connected to that vision. I really connected deeply to my why. And what actually ended happened me really being connected, deeply connected to my mission is that that manifested itself into physical reality because I was fully booked with my coaching consulting practice before the book was even published. So that's definitely another tip I would give to any aspiring author. Really write your book coming from a place of where you want to be rather than where you currently are. So just because you're currently stuck in a 9-to-5 doesn't mean that you'll be stuck there forever. So it's like write your book and we deeply connect to that vision, almost like reverse engineer how you can get there. And the last piece of advice I would give is whenever you are faced with rejection, when you're afraid or, oh my God, what if nobody likes my book? And then or maybe you overwrite and then ask yourself, oh my God, what if someone actually reads my book? What will happen then? Because you may be faced with a lot of rejection. Just say, always remind yourself why you're doing it. So deeply, again, this ties into what I have shared earlier on, to really deeply connect to your why. And just remind yourself that even if there's just one person, obviously there are 8 billion people on the planet. If there's just one person on the planet that this doesn't take on their own life, just because you shared your story, then is it not worth all the rejection you can possibly face in the world? Just one person, just focus on helping one person.
Exactly, very, very well.
With that one person in mind.
Very, very well said. Even if you can change the life of one person amongst these 8 billion people, it's worth it. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Sandra, for sharing this. Premraj, if we have questions from the audience, please go ahead, or you could read out a few of the comments.
Thank you, Deepak. Let me read out some of the comments that have come in. Dr. Jagannath says, definitely it must have been a low point in life, especially when you are alone and young. Payal Irani says, well said, Sandra, the strength comes from within. Dr. Jagannath says again, definitely education is a passport to freedom. Well said, Sandra. Work with people ahead of me. Great takeaway. Thank you. Dominica says, Sandra, you're such an inspirational woman. Thank you for sharing your story. Dr. Jagannath again says, yes, language definitely has power. Some says words have power. While Irani says, you're your own research, so authentic, Sandra. Eric Martin says, astute advice to check the negative reviews and cover the missing points. Applies to any product or offering. See what competition does not do and fill that need. Well said, Eric. Bindu says, yes, consistency is the key. Also, it is important to know our most creative time during the day and blocking that time out to create your best content. Great tip, Sandra. Eric Martin says, writing a secret message authorship as self-therapy. Dominica says, Sandra, you're becoming a strong dragon. Payal Irani says, good questions, Premraj. Thank you, Payal. Bindu says, our harshest critics develops our biggest growth. Super message. Payal says, Dominica, a dragon with a golden heart. Then Bindu says, Premraj is an excellent host, always coming up with great questions and bringing the best out of guests and their knowledge and experience. Thank you, Bindu. That's very comforting. Aarti Naran says, super session. I have to leave for another scheduled call. Best wishes, Sandra. You were awesome. Bindu says, harsh critic shows how we can grow as leaders. Great pointers, good pointers. Dr. Jagannath says, write consistently for 3 weeks. Great advice indeed. Thank you, Sandra. Arvind Bandivadikar says, great questions, Premraj. You're a super host. Thank you, Arvind. Nice of you. Raina says, thank you for such insights and great simplistic and unique sharing about your writing experiences. Great questions curated, Premraj. Thank you, Raina. Brenda says, you are the prize. Nice insight. Eric Martin says, reputed literary agents with experience and contacts that you lack are the way to go, and their advice is also worthwhile to follow. Dr. Jagannath Rao says, thank you, Sandra, for sharing very valuable information on publishing. Great set of curated questions. Thank you, Premraj. Nice of you, Dr. Dominica says, I've been offered to share my story to be part of a book, and I heard that I need to pay 2,000. I haven't got that money. Eric Martin says, in case the author will have to do most of the work of promoting the work, book signing and media exposure, etc., building a following for the next title. Bindu says, Sandra, thanks for the tons of knowledge, do's and don'ts for aspiring authors like me. Thank you, Bloom team, for hosting Sandra. Thanks to you.
The more that makes me happy. I'm so deeply honored to be here to share my life's journey with all of you, with all the audience. Thanks so much, Payal, Deepak, and Premraj for having me. I'm really actually delighted to be here with you today.
So let me end this now. Thank you for consenting to be on our show at this pre-breakfast hour. Over the last 1.5 hours, we have had a very engaging conversation regarding your role as a midwife for aspiring women authors and nuances for the writing industry. You are an inspiration, helping people dance to the beats of their own drums. We are privileged to have someone of your stature on our show. We wish you more power in your crusade. Thank you and God bless.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Sandra, for gracing Bloom platform. As you said, even if you impact one person out of 8 billion people, it's worth it. That's how Bloom was birthed 7 months ago, to impact one person out of 8 billion people. And we are doing that. And I feel honored and privileged to have you on Bloom platform, and all special thanks from all our team Bloom. So gratitude, and looking forward to invite you again for your masterclass. And yes, let's connect offline for the dates.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It was an absolute privilege. Thanks so much for the invitation.